You are standing in a room with no hum of machinery, no vents whispering overhead, no hidden system quietly draining money from your wall, and yet the air feels different, calmer, lighter, unmistakably cooler than what waits outside the door. Not dramatically at first, not in a way that shocks you, but in a way your body recognizes before your mind does. You pause without realizing it. You breathe deeper. The tension you didn't notice begins to loosen, and then it hits you. This room is cooler by nearly 7 degrees, and nothing is running to make that happen. No electricity. No fan, no air conditioner, just a simple setup that costs less than a meal and takes less time than brewing coffee. I remember the first moment I felt it, standing in a quiet space that shouldn't have felt the way it did. I didn't understand it, and honestly, part of me didn't believe it. But curiosity has a way of pulling you forward when something feels real, and what you're about to learn isn't new, it isn't an experimental, and it isn't complicated. It's something older than modern comfort itself, something quietly working in the background of history while the rest of the world forgot to look. The question that stayed with me long after that moment was simple, almost too simple. Why does air sometimes feel different, even when the temperature change is small? Not just cooler, but cleaner, softer, easier to exist in. That question led me down a path I didn't expect, into materials most people overlook, and systems most people have never been told about. At the center of it is something called activated charcoal, but not the kind you throw on a grill. This is a form of carbon treated in a way that opens millions of microscopic pores inside it. And those pores change everything. A single gram holds an internal surface area, so vast it almost doesn't make sense until you see it explained. Imagine compressing the space of an entire room into something that fits between your fingers. That's what's happening inside it. Now, take that structure and introduce water. Let it soak, let it fill those pores completely, and then expose it to warm, moving air. What happens next is quiet, invisible, and incredibly powerful. The water begins to evaporate, and in doing so, it pulls heat from the surrounding air, not redirects it, not pushes it somewhere else. It removes it. The air that continues past that surface carries less heat than it had before. If you've ever felt a breeze on your skin after sweating, you already understand the principle. Your body cools itself through evaporation. This system simply scales that process far beyond what your skin alone can do. And the beauty of it is that it doesn't need anything to keep working, except water and airflow. When I first started testing it myself, I didn't expect much. Maybe a slight difference, maybe something barely noticeable, but the result was consistent enough to make me stop and pay attention. A few degrees at first, then more, as I adjusted placement and airflow. And here's where I want to pause for a second, not to teach, but to talk to you directly. If you're still here, if something about this feels worth your time, just take a moment and let me know. Not because it helps me in some algorithmic way, but because it tells me you're seeing what I'm seeing, that small practical things can still matter in a world that keeps getting louder and more complicated. What makes this system work or fail comes down to something most people overlook completely: placement. You can build it perfectly and still get almost nothing from it if you put it in the wrong spot. But charcoal isn't meant to sit in the middle of a room like a decoration. It's meant to intercept the air before it reaches you. Think of it like a gate. Every bit of air entering your space should pass over that wet surface. A window, a doorway, any opening where air naturally moves. That's where it belongs. When you get that part right, the difference becomes real. Not instant, not dramatic like flipping a switch, but steady and noticeable. And the setup itself couldn't be simpler. A shallow tray, a layer of charcoal a couple inches deep, water poured until it's fully saturated, then drained so it's wet but not submerged. That's it. 15 minutes, maybe 20, if you take your time. No tools, no special skills, no dependency on anything outside your reach. Now here's something I didn't expect to matter as much as it does. The environment you're in changes how well this works. In dry conditions, the effect is stronger because the air has more capacity to absorb moisture. In more humid places, the cooling is more modest, but still meaningful. And meaningful is the word that matters here, because even a small drop in temperature can change how you sleep, how you focus, how your body handles the day. 4 degrees doesn't sound like much until you've spent a night without it. And if you try this, really try it, but honestly want to hear what happens for you. Not polished results, not perfect numbers, just your experience before and after, because those real moments from real people are worth more than anything I could explain. There's another layer to this that surprised me even more than the cooling itself. Activated charcoal doesn't just interact with heat, it interacts with what's in the air. Odors, gases, compounds you don't see, but definitely feel. When it's wet, it actively absorbs them, not masking them, not covering them up, but removing them. And you notice that the air doesn't just feel cooler, it feels cleaner, lighter, easier to breathe. If you've ever walked into a space and immediately felt comfortable without knowing why, this is part of that feeling. It's subtle, but it adds up. At some point during all of this, I came across something that shifted the entire picture for me. A detail so simple it almost feels obvious once you hear it, but I had never seen it explained anywhere in a practical way. The charcoal doesn't have to work alone. When you place a porous clay container filled with water next to it, something interesting happens. The clay slowly releases moisture through its surface, creating its own evaporative cooling effect. But instead of just adding to the charcoal's effect, it actually enhances it. The two processes interact. The air around them changes in a way that improves how each one works. It's not just addition, it's amplification, and you can set this up just as easily. A simple unglazed clay pot, filled with water, placed right beside the charcoal in that same airflow path. That's it. No modifications, no complexity, just two materials working together the way they've always been capable of. I remember sitting with that realization for a while, not because it was complicated, but because it wasn't. It made me think about how many things like this exist quietly in the background, not hidden, not restricted, just not talked about. And I'm not saying that to make some big statement. I'm saying it because it felt personal. Like discovering something small but meaningful that you wish someone had told you sooner. And if you've ever had that feeling too, where you learn something practical and immediately think, why didn't I know this before? Then you understand what I mean. Over time, what started as curiosity turned into something more consistent. A routine. Adding a little water in the morning and letting the system do its work throughout the day. Occasionally, resetting the charcoal by letting it sit in sunlight. Nothing demanding, nothing that pulls your attention away from everything else you're doing. It just becomes part of the environment. And that's the part I appreciate most. It doesn't ask much from you, but it gives something back every single day. If you decide to try it, don't overthink it. Keep it simple. Focus on placement. Keep the charcoal wet but not flooded, and let the airflow do the rest. And if it works for you, even a little, come back and share that. Not for me, but for anyone else who's quietly wondering if something this simple can actually make a difference. Because those shared experiences build something real, not hype, not theory. Just people helping people figure things out. And before you go, just one more thing, not as a request, but as a thought. If you find value in things like this, small systems, overlooked ideas, practical knowledge that makes life a bit easier, then stay close to that curiosity, follow it. Because there's more out there than most people realize, and sometimes all it takes is one small discovery to change how you see everything else.